Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Multipliers Club. Today, we are joined with another very special guest, a life coach and motivational speaker, and the author of the book Energized. That is Simon Alexander Ong. Simon, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, guys.
Very much.
Yeah. So, first of all, I think we'll just learn a little bit about you, your backstory, how you actually, I think before you started off in the financial industry, if I'm correct.
Yeah, so I was born here in the UK to two Malaysian Chinese parents who had emigrated here for a better life. They met at university. They decided to settle down in the southeast of England. And I grew up as very much part of a minority. You know, in my school, secondary school, I was like one of 6 or 7 Chinese students, not just in my year, but entire school. And sometimes people say to me, Simon, do you look back at that and think it was bad being a minority? And I look back and think, actually, it was a positive. You know, one of the positive stereotypes.
Can I ask you how long ago that was?
I'll be giving away my age, isn't it?
Is that a real question? Or?
That's a very long time ago now. But I look back fondly, actually, because it was, I had a very positive stereotype of an experience. When people wanted to start a fight with me, all I had to do was make some Bruce Lee sounds, brush my thumb across my upper lip, and they went running. And especially when I decided to shave my head one summer, that meant that people definitely didn't want to mess with me now.
It's funny you say that though, because literally my friends as well, they're Chinese. And they did the same thing. They said that everyone thought they knew like the maddest combats, and they just lived it. They didn't have a clue, but they just lived that with that.
And it's funny, the perception, because this was before social media and the internet. And I remember when you got back from summer holidays, people would always ask you, what did you do over the summer holidays? Sometimes rumors would go around. And that one summer holiday where I came back after deciding to shave my head, the rumor went around that I spent the summer in a Shaolin monastery. and so people definitely didn't want to mess with me from that point. So yeah,
just like embrace the rumor, like that was me.
I embraced it. And when I got to university, the rumor went from Shaolin monastery to actually it's a part of the triads. So I thought, just embrace that. Just embrace that. So yeah, when I went through school, I had this mistaken belief that success was defined by my job title. I had very strict Asian parents. They wanted me to do well at school, get a good job, go to a good university. And so my choice really was between be a banker, be a doctor, be a lawyer, or be an accountant. I didn't really like the other choices apart from banking, because I watched films such as Wall Street, Boiler Room with Ben Affleck, and I thought this sounded like a cool career. And so I decided to start in the financial industry in the middle of 2007. Probably the worst time to begin. This was a year before the global financial crisis of 2008. And the company I decided to sign on with was Lehman Brothers, which collapsed into bankruptcy 14 months after I joined. Nothing to do with me, by the way. And so that really kickstarted the journey to what I get to do today, because I said to myself, as long as I worked for someone, a lot of my destiny would be outside of my control. But if I could find a path where I could work for myself, then yes, it would be tough, it would be challenging, but a lot more would be within my control. And so that really started with 2 questions. The first was, what did success mean to me? And the second was, what sort of impact did I want to have in the world? That first one I think is important, because when you look at society around us, many of us are exhausted, not because we are physically doing too much, but because, first of all, we are running someone else's race. And secondly, we're doing too little of the things that bring us joy. And the second thing, what sort of impact did I want to have in the world? For me, it was important because I believe that our value as humans is determined by how much more we have given to the world than we have taken from it. And so that led me to what I now get to do today, which is coaching the likes of corporate executives, entrepreneurs, celebrities, creatives, speaking at some incredible places across the world, companies, conferences, and other public events. And more recently, writing my first book, Energize.
Cool. That's incredible. So from the Lehman Brothers collapsing, is that when you went into the entrepreneurial road, or did you have a couple of other jobs from there whilst you were still trying to work it out? Like, what were the steps there for you?
Yeah, so I actually went into another job in finance because I didn't know what else there was out there. And I was still in the financial industry for nearly 10 years, just moving between jobs in the industry. But what I began to do is I began to be intentional with my time outside of work. So I started to read different books. I started to go to seminars. I started to listen to podcasts, audio tapes, basically anything I could get my hands on that would teach me about the business world. And so I had to get there mentally first before I knew the steps I had to take to make that a reality.
For sure. Who did you like to listen to when you were first getting into personal development? Was it like Jim Rohn?
Yeah, Jim Rohn's a classic. I watched a lot of Jim Rohn videos on YouTube.
Yeah,
one of the first books I read, which had a big impact on me, was Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich. And then the one event I went to where I said to myself, you know what, I think I can do that as well up on that stage, was it was an event run by Success Resources, called National Achievers Congress, and it was held at the Excel Centre in London. I only went for the first day. It was a 3-day event. I could only make it for the first day. But that was enough because the speaker in the morning of the first day was Tony Robbins. And I was sat in one of those fun areas. And I saw what he was doing on stage. And I said to my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, I said to her, I can do that. I said to her, I can get up on that stage and speak. Obviously I didn't have the qualifications down, I didn't have the experience, but I felt like I could be doing that one day. And I think that gave me the belief to start doing something. I always say that there are 2 sales that occur in anything that we do. The second is selling ourselves to others, and the first is selling ourselves to ourselves. And until we can do the first well, the second will always remain a challenge. So I started selling myself to myself and seeing that I could be like one of those people up on stage. And as that became more solid, the actions that I took became much more intentional.
Tony Robbins gave you like the initial inspiration and motivation to think I could do that. So the next steps for you from there, what were you going to, like public speaking seminars, like self-mentoring type of things? How did you get into?
Yeah, so the first step I took, and I think I really saw this in action when I was at that Tony Robbins event, is the fastest way to make any progress in our life, our business, or our career is literally to design an environment around us that makes it impossible not to succeed. And so what I started to do was literally redesign my environment. So out went the pointless magazines that I was buying, in came books that were going to give me information. When I went to watch things on YouTube, on television, they were very intentional. I started watching things like Dragon's Den, The Apprentice. I went onto YouTube to see interviews with billionaires and millionaires, successful individuals, and really started to codify how they did what they did. Yeah. And then I just got out and experimented because what I realized is that you can get all of the knowledge you want. It's never been easier to get the knowledge you need. But the real missing step is action. It's putting that knowledge into action. And really to collapse that gap between having the idea or insight and putting it into action. For a lot of us, that gap is huge. That gap is wide. We have an idea, we have an insight, and then we create a list of reasons why we can't do it. Yeah. And so we never actually get to the point of taking action. And I wanted to just collapse that gap to be as short as I could and just get out there, experiment, and really approach it from the mindset of a scientist. Because when a scientist carries out an experiment, it's never going to be successful the first time you do it. And what happens is when it fails, they take a step back, they write their observations, they write what they learn, they do it again.
It's a really good analogy, actually, think of it like that, to be fair. I think that's that's exactly what we've done with this podcast. Especially me, obviously, it's something I'd always wanted to do and make a real success of, and I'm really passionate about it. But I always thought it would have to come further down the line once I've got this real big success, once I've, made a name for myself and so on. And that's where I think it was actually Jake at the MC where James was.
He's like, do it now.
He said, why not now? He was like, why not do it now? And I was like, first of all, and he's like, why not now? I was like, and then next thing, here we are, we were speaking to James and we started the podcast. And even from the first episode to this episode, I don't know what we're on, 6 or 7. I think there's probably already been a huge improvement. In front of the cameras now. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not nervous at all. And we're much more relaxed. And so, imagine podcast 100. I'm sure, again, there's going to be a huge improvement. And actually do that over the course of the next 4 or 5 years, which is when I thought I would get started, perhaps. Hopefully, we've already, made a great success of it and we're very experienced. And it's just getting started and improving and being willing to put yourselves out there.
It's taking
Exactly.
action. at the
Taking
end of the
action
day, yeah.
and learning and trying to grow from
And I
it,
love that
really.
because what you've shared there is the fact that first step is always the toughest. I saw this illustration on Instagram recently, which I thought was a fantastic visual demonstration of the journey. Is that it had a staircase, but the very first step was taller than the rest of the steps. Because the thing is, once you overcome that first step, the other steps become easier.
Yeah.
Because once you start taking steps forward, you create the feeling of momentum. And you can describe it as, I'm going places. There's that inner feeling that something good is coming. Yeah. And once you've got that behind you, you have more confidence to take the next step and the next step and the next step. So actually what we need to begin is not confidence, but it's courage. The courage just to take that leap of faith into the unknown.
I completely agree with that. And I was talking about this before we came to meet you, actually. I think on the polar opposite to courage, a lot of people, and I think even I've experienced a few times, imposter syndrome. I think that's very common. A lot of people sometimes might be put onto great opportunities, but they might not feel like they deserve it or are good enough. Have you ever experienced that? And what would your advice be to somebody who could be going through imposter syndrome?
Absolutely. But I mean, the first thing I would say about imposter syndrome is that a little bit is actually good. Because if you're not feeling any imposter syndrome, are you really putting yourself out of your comfort zone? For me, it's that whenever you are putting yourself out of your comfort zone, you are always going to get a little bit of imposter syndrome. I mean, when I started to develop my coaching business, I remember the first time I had a prospect meeting with a CEO of a company. I've never done any work when I was in the corporate world with a C-level executive. I mean, I was the junior. It would take me decades to get to that level. Yet now I'm running my own business. I'm meeting people at that level. And I had imposter syndrome going into that meeting. I'm like, this guy is X number of years older than me. He's earning a lot more than I'm earning right now. What value is he going to see in what I have to offer? And it goes back to what I said earlier. You've got to sell yourself to yourself first. And I think with imposter syndrome, it's embracing that and having a healthy relationship with it, not to see it as bad. And I think that's where the issue comes from. When we see imposter syndrome as bad, then we're actually thinking, we've got to overcome it. I've got to eliminate imposter syndrome. But actually, having a healthier, more positive relationship with it can actually give us the courage we need to overcome it. To say, yes, actually, it's good to have a little bit of imposter syndrome. I'm growing. I'm developing. There's a quote by the philosopher Alain de Botton, and he said, if you are not embarrassed by who you were a year ago, you're not growing enough. So if you're growing enough and developing enough, every single year you move forward and you look back, you're looking back at the old you and saying, man, did I do that a year ago? Because you're moving so fast in your development that you just don't recognize who you were a year ago or 2 years ago or beyond. Yeah.
Especially obviously with us all running businesses and startup businesses, I've just, for example, gone through a rebrand and I was so proud of the first branding. I had... anyways, looking back 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when I first saw that logo, I was so happy, so excited. I thought the vans looked so good. Then I was going through a rebrand as I started seeing, before it was released, but as I started seeing all the branding and the new website and stuff, I was looking at that. Oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. I don't want to hand it. It was at Founders, obviously, for the listeners. We had KP, the owner of the Founders Club, in a previous episode. Obviously, you're a member of Founders. That's where we got speaking. But yeah, even there before this, I was like, I don't even want to hand these business cards out. I was so embarrassed. 3 years ago, I was so proud of it. I was wanting to give everyone my business card. And yeah, it's in a short space of time, as you learn new things and you open up your eyes and your mind to sort of new ways, it's you look back at your old ways and think, oh my God, did I really think that was acceptable? And stuff like that. So I think it's, yes, like I say, it's good. I think the thing with the podcast is, what's funny is, we're 100% going to have that. And we're putting ourselves out there. So we're going to be able to look back and it's going to be us speaking, our faces on social media.
In a year's time, we're going to think.
We'll look back at the first post on social media.
Already, if we look back on the first episode we filmed, apologies to the viewers watching this about
the three viewers are watching.
Yeah, maybe there's two watching now, but we were so nervous for the first podcast. We weren't getting our personalities across. And we're all quite personable, funny, likable, I'd like to think, characters. And, we want to make, I think the more we do it, the more natural something starts to feel. So I've got a question, actually, just out of curiosity, because you've had huge levels of success. You've spoken in front of thousands of people. Do you still get nervous?
I still do get nervous. I mean, I would be lying if I said I didn't get nervous. We're human at the end of the day, so we are going to get nervous. However, how nervous I get is a lot less because I think what compensates for the nerves now is excitement. When you first do anything when you do something for the very first time, you're always going to have more nerves and excitement because you're worried in here. You're wondering, oh, will I remember what I'm going to say? What if they catch me out? What if they don't like what I'm going to say? So you're in your head.
All the negatives, right?
It's all the negatives. But as you get the experience, as you become more fluent in what you do, you get more excitement. You're excited to go into a room of thousands of people. Yeah. The time where the nerves do creep in is still when you do something for the first time. So for example, I've done radio a lot. And so when I do live radio, that for me is fine. But it's a walk in the park. But then I remember when I got my first invitation to do a live interview in Sky News. Now that's a complete different setup. They're going to see you, and whatever you say, you cannot take back. I mean, your face is going to be on the big screen. And even though it was only an 8-minute segment, it felt like 8 seconds. It felt like it went so quick. That one, I was nervous because I'd never done it before. And so as humans, we don't like uncertainty. So when you haven't done something before, you kind of think, oh, how's it going to go? And I just remember thinking back now when I had this earpiece in my ear and the guy was saying, okay, Simon, we're going to be going live in 7, 6, 5. I was thinking, I just closed my eyes.
Sounds like a movie.
I closed my eyes and I just like calmed myself down. And then it was 1, we are now live. And then I just opened and just got into the mood.
You came across really well. Well done.
You watched it back?
I have watched it back, although I don't tend to like watching too much of my stuff back. For me, I like to do it, put it out there, and I'm done.
That's it. It's done now, isn't it?
That's how I was in the group chat the other day with us before we actually went live on the social media. And I sent a voice and I was like, when we came in and we was filming, obviously we was all nervous, but I wasn't that nervous. I was quite relaxed. Obviously the cameras are over there and I don't feel like I'm on camera right now. But then when it came to actually posting on social media and we was trying to prove it with our social media manager, he was like, oh my God. I was like, I'm dying inside. But now it's out and it doesn't bother me. But what about with, obviously you released your book, first book. That's something new. Again, something you can't take back once you've published your book.
Exactly. That for me was one of the greatest challenges, but also one of the most incredible things I've ever done in my life. First of all, the reason I say it was one of the greatest challenges is because I got the book deal with Penguin, which I mean for me was an absolute dream come true. I mean to publish with a name like Penguin, it's just out of this world.
Can I ask you a question? Sorry to interrupt. So how does that work? Like, how do you get a deal with Penguin? Did you have the idea that you wanted to create a book or they approached you?
Not at all. So usually when you want to get a book deal with a publisher like Penguin, you have 2 options. The first option is you go for an agent. So you have a literary agent that represents you and they will use their contacts and they will go out to the publishers and say, hey, I'm representing Simon. He has his book idea.
You'd written all of the...
No, so I did the second option. So the second option to get the book deal is you don't go for an agent and you do it yourself. Wow. And what happened is I got approached by a boutique publisher and they were thinking about giving me an offer for doing a book together. But I reviewed the offer and to me it was a win-lose. And so I said to myself, if I'm going to write a book, which publishing house would I love to do it with? And I brainstormed all the big names. I wrote down Penguin, Hay House, HarperCollins, all of these like names that I hear about when you go to a bookshop. And I just started reaching out to these editors, people working at the company on platforms like LinkedIn and Instagram. Yeah. So they would start to see my content. And that's how I did it. And a couple of months after I started building those networks, I reached out and say, hey, I've got an idea for a book. By the way, I hadn't put anything together yet. I just had the idea as a title. Would you be interested in having a conversation? And I sent this out to lots of different publishers. And, you have moments of luck in life. Penguin were the only one that replied. Wow. And that's really how the conversation started. And it was April 2020 when they sent the offer and we started the negotiation for the contract. And the reason I say it has been one of my greatest challenges is because in that same month, April 2020, of course, the United Kingdom, as with many other countries around the world, went into their first lockdown. I also became a father for the first time. And because of lockdown, speaking is a lot of what I do. Overnight, that part of my business went to zero. Because all the events that I've been booked to speak at were in-person events. Straight away, they said, Simon, we've got to cancel. We can't continue with the event because by government regulation, we cannot host it. And so I had to adapt my business while balancing all of these other roles of being a parent. Now I'm an author. We don't have any help because both sides of our family are abroad. And it was literally all hands on deck for the best part of 18 months. And so when that book did come out in April 2022, it was such a beautiful feeling to see something you put so much work into that consumed you for nearly 2 years out into the world, and you know, people taking photos on social media, you seeing people pick it up in the bookstore. It was such an incredible feeling to see that occur.
Have you got any plans to write a second book or not yet?
I would love to. It depends on the publisher. One of the ambitions I have is to take some of my work and translate it onto the big screen. So either through the form of streaming platforms like Netflix or Amazon and Apple, or on the bigger screen like cinema, because I'm noticing a trend of non-fiction books being translated into that medium. Yeah. So if you've ever read books by like Marie Kondo that got turned into a Netflix series, Brené Brown, even Tony Robbins, he had the show I'm Not Your Guru
I see that.
on Netflix. Yeah. And this year, Mark Manson's film, based on his book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, is coming out.
Oh, really?
So, you know, I think there's a trend of positivity being channeled into the big screen. So I'm looking to explore that avenue as well.
It's great to hear about like the success you've had and the transition as well, because going from finance to motivational speaking, they don't always necessarily link hand in hand.
Completely different. I mean, I still remember when I handed in my resignation, my final job before I became a full-time entrepreneur. I went into the meeting room and I told my boss ahead of time that I want to have a chat. Whenever you say I want to have a chat and you're booking a meeting,
they know the deal.
They kind of know what's going to happen. I'm either trying to ask for a promotional pay rise, or you're leaving, or you're about to hand in your resignation.
Did you have it in your head? Were you like, if they counter offer me, I'm not going to take it, or did you have it in your head that I was pretty
set to leave.
So there wouldn't have been a number that would have kept you.
No, I maybe in hindsight, I don't know, but I didn't think they could pay the number if there was a number. I think if they could, maybe. I don't know, maybe I wouldn't be sitting here today. So I remember having that conversation, and his initial thought was I was going to be going to a competitor. Right. So he was like, tell me who's paid you off? Put it on the table. Who's giving you a better salary? Who's giving you a better bonus? We'll match that. And I said to him, no, I'm not going to a competitor. I'm quitting the industry and I'm looking to run my own business. And it was almost when I saw he had a bit of a sigh, it was almost like, oh, that's not so bad actually. Because I think it would have been worse if I went to a competitor. Yeah. And that for me was a very tough moment, because as anybody who's quit the corporate rat race to start their own business knows, is that you're literally at that very point saying goodbye to guaranteed monthly income, benefits, and whatever comes with working in a job within a company, safety. But at the same time, I was filled with excitement. I was like, if I could develop, because while I was running this, at the time it was a side hustle on the side of the full-time job. If I could build it to the point I did on the side of my full-time job, imagine what I could do putting 100% of my energy into this every single day. Yeah. And I haven't looked back since.
I think that's what we all go through, really, isn't it? Like, yeah, when you're leaving or obviously doing the transition, it's just nerves. Like, and, you know, no one really wants to leave and leave the stability. But, you know, there's always bigger things that are out there that everyone wants and dreams of. So it's just dream chasing, you know, and that's what we're doing.
Indeed. And I think the one statement I came across at the time that gave me that nudge, because I was going back and forth in my head for months. do I quit now? Do I not quit now? Do I quit now? Do I not quit now? It took me about 4 months of deciding mentally in my head before.
You have to sell yourself to yourself.
Indeed. I had to sell myself to myself. And the quote that I came across, which gave me that nudge, was a quote by Aristotle where he said, you have 2 lives, and that second life begins the moment you realize you have only one.
I've seen that.
And that was like, wow, powerful. That was very profound. I was like, I'm going for it. Yeah. And that gave me the nudge.
That's wicked. I think the only reason I went full time with my business is, as you boys know, I got fired. And it's the best thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah.
Luckily, it worked out. You know? But at the same time, a lot of entrepreneurs, it doesn't work out for. Why do you think a lot of entrepreneurs, I think the statistics are scary, right? It's like 1 in 2 fail, or they might be even higher than that. Why do you think that is? Like, why do you think most people don't make it?
Far more than that. I think if you look at it as like businesses, I guess for people, there's multiple businesses, but something like 90% of businesses or more than that in the 10 years have failed. And in the first 2 years, it's not far off that. But yeah,
why
Sam's question.
I think there's probably a number of different factors. The first factor that comes to my mind is the fact they are not doing it for the right reason. Usually a lot of people that go into entrepreneurship, and it's never been easier to start your own business in today's world. But one of the reasons I see a lot of people go into business is because they hate what they do. And they think by going into business, I'm going to make money, I'm going to have the lifestyle I want, I'm going to have all the glamour that you see on social media or in the magazines you read.
They expect it so quick as well.
Yeah, they expect it quick. And so that gap between expectation and reality is massive. And they're not going in it for the right reasons because they're just using it as an escape route from the grind of something they just hate and detest. But they haven't really sat down and thought about, well, what is the thing I do enjoy? What is it do I want? And until I think we know the answer to that or actually have some clues, then we're doing it for the wrong reasons. We're doing it for the money. We're doing it for the glamour. And that never lasts. It's like signing up to a gym just because you want that 6-pack. And what happens is 3-4 months down the road, people look at the mirror and go, I don't have that 6-pack. I'm going to quit the gym. And they stop going.
Because they haven't been going to the gym properly.
Yeah. and they don't achieve that because they're going into it for the wrong reasons. The only way to keep up anything is that if you truly enjoy it and you love the benefits you get from it. So I always say that money is the wrong reason to get into business. Money is only what I would call a means goal, a springboard, a money that comes into account to allow you to do what? Yeah. What is the money going to allow you to do?
It's freedom tokens, right?
Exactly. And this is where people have to ask themselves, if I had all the money I want, what would that allow me to do? Focus on painting that visual. Get connected to that because what happens is that vision then has a positive charge. It pulls you forward. A lot of us, we have to push ourselves forwards. And this is why many people fail in New Year's resolutions. They say to themselves, this year I'm going to get fitter. And then they go, okay, I'm going to go 3 times a week. I'm going to go in the morning at 6 in the morning. But what happens is you have to keep pushing yourself forward because the way they've structured that isn't helpful. But if they actually thought to themselves, well, what is a fitter lifestyle going to help me with? And they start creating a visual of the possibilities that can lead to, then they don't need to worry about getting up at 6 or going 3 times a week. They'll naturally go without thinking about it.
I suppose that's the main part of your job then, trying to really convince people like to find the actual reason, because people will come to you and be like, oh, this is what I want this, I need you to coach me on how to get there. Like, why do you want to be there? Is that
definitely? I think often what I find is that when people come to me and they tell me I want this, very often it's not actually what they really want. It's what they think they want.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you've watched the film Inception by Christopher Nolan starring Leonardo DiCaprio. But I love using this analogy that coaching, the work I do is very much like Inception. Is that what happens is that through the process of coaching, you go layer beneath a layer beneath a layer, all the way down to who they truly are, deep down. And when you are at that level, in the film they call it limbo, but when you're at that level of unconstructed space, and you can start to understand how they see their world, what is important to them, what has led them to where they are today, what are their beliefs and values, then you can use that as a foundation to create a different future. So that when they then come back out into reality hasn't changed, but the way they see their reality has changed. And that's why I liken coaching to Inception, because it's really about understanding who they are at a visceral level and then changing that blueprint.
And how do you get to that level? You as the coach trying to get them to that level. How do you do that? How do you break through the barriers?
Yeah. So first of all, whoever I work with, they have to be open to the process. Now, one of the things I often get asked is, Simon, how do I change my partner? How do I change my colleague? How do I change my boss? I mean, the fact is you can't change somebody who doesn't want to be changed. So the first thing is they've got to be open to the process. Second is being open to be challenged. And this is where the magic happens. The magic happens through questions. When you ask the right question at the right moment, what happens is you unlock a space of reflection. And often they give that away through their nonverbal, i.e. their body language. So sometimes things don't align. They say, I really want this, and I think it's going to help me do this. And then you see their body language and they're not so sure. The body language comes across as fairly reluctant. And so I will challenge them a bit more. I will simply pause and say, is that what you want? Or is that what you think you want? And then we'll just pause and see what that opens up. And it's kind of like if you've ever watched the TV series of Sherlock Holmes with Benedict Cumberbatch, it's the same process of Sherlock inviting his customer onto the armchair in his office and saying, tell me what happened. And then he tries to get into their mind to solve the mystery, to solve the crime through the power of questions, to really understand how they see their world. And that's how I do it, because when you understand their reality, you can understand how they operate. And then you create an element of trust that they see you as their guide.
I actually had my own experience with it recently. So I've got a business mentor and a life coach as well. Like it's both mixed in one. I mean, these guys know that I've got it. And he done the same thing. So before I even started with him, he sat me down. Obviously, it's all about setting goals and working out what you actually want. And he sat me down and he's kind of, what do you want? And I gave him all this stuff. I've got a 10-year plan. What do you want in the next year, 12 months? 2-year, 5-year, 10-year. We all do goal setting. Like we all write down goals and we kind of know what we want. But I've written, like the stuff that I had written down was, I'll be honest, fairly shallow. And he was kind of like, I was thinking it was shallow. And I was like, yes, I want the house, I want the cars, I want the watches, and what's this business goals as well, and amount of employees, and then your kind of spiritual goals and your charity giving goals. But a lot of them were materialistic stuff. And I sat there and I felt really shallow. And he was like, but why do you want this? But then I actually come to realize the reason that I actually wanted it, he helped me realize the reason. And it's all to do with experiences. I want to have experiences that not many people get to have, because you only get one life, and I want to experience as much as possible with me and my friends and my family and the people that are close to me, and give them experiences that, again, other people are unable to experience as well.
It's so interesting hearing that, because I had a conversation recently, and so many of us, when we get into the world of work, whether you start a business or you work for someone, we tend to focus so much on what I call career virtues, which are how much I'm earning, what house I have, where I live, what brand I work for, the status I have. And the thing we realize is that when we pass from this world, when someone's reading your eulogy at your funeral, nobody's going to talk about those things. Nobody's going to say, hey, this guy was the biggest earner in the village. He got the quickest promotions in the fastest time and made the most money for the company. Nobody's going to talk about that. What we realize is that when we get older, what we should be focusing our time on is legacy virtues. And legacy virtues are things such as, what sort of impact did I have in the lives of people I came into touch with? What story did I write? What is my message going to be when I pass? Whose stories am I going to be in terms of other people I'm impacting? And these are the things that people are going to talk about at the end of our lives. And so when I think about my vision, going back to what you were saying about the 2, 5, and longer term goals, I like to see it in this way, because it helped me to get a better understanding of how this works. Is I would pick a magazine that I love reading. So it could be Entrepreneur Magazine or Fast Company or Forbes Magazine. And I would imagine that when I'm 80 years old, that they would run a lifetime feature about what I had accomplished in my life. And I would ask myself, what would I love to be written in that article? And that would help me understand what is important for me to focus on.
What's your next move, I suppose? Yeah.
What's why do you think for certain people, because I think we're all quite, we want to leave a legacy behind and everything you just spoke about. And for me especially, I'm really a big believer that you should want to leave something substantial, change the world for the better and leave something behind. But a lot of people aren't like that. They just like living their day-to-day lives. And so like, why would you say it's important for humans as a whole to want to strive to leave a legacy, to want to, I can't remember what you just called it in comparison to virtue.
Yeah, so legacy virtues. I mean, first of all, keeping my legacy doesn't have to be anything grand. Yeah. Because we all have a different definition of success and happiness. So for some people living their day-to-day lives, success to them might just be being a good parent. Yeah. And so their legacy might be to raise quality children. And that's completely fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I just think it's about being clear on what that is for us. Many of us don't know, so we fall into the trap of measuring our progress and our success and legacy against metrics determined by someone else. And so that's why when you ask a lot of people, what is success for you? They go to the default answer of a big house, a nice car, $1 million in the bank account. Now, is that what everybody wants? I mean, yes, I'm sure that would be nice if you had it. But as we've seen with lots of people who have had that in their life, it didn't necessarily make them happy.
It made it more miserable at times.
Indeed. And the things they own, they end up owning them.
Do you find that a lot with the clients you're working with and the type of people? I'm guessing you work with a lot of highly, I don't know if to use the word successful, but successful by the metrics you just gave there. Do you find that a lot, that the happiness isn't there, or they kind of came to realize once they got that, actually, maybe that's why they're coming to you perhaps now at this stage of their life?
What they've learned is that happiness isn't to be found out there. They grew up in a world in which they've been taught happiness is when you have money, when you have a house, when you have a car, when you've got a nice family, or whatever other metrics they have built their life around. But what they come to realize is that doesn't make them happy. That actually happiness is found internally, and that we can choose to be happy now. And that actually, when you think about happiness as a concept, it begins with gratitude. And that's why when somebody's going through a tough time, one of the exercises I get them to do, which elevates their energy in an instant, is a 3-step gratitude process. The first step is to write down the name of somebody that you can be grateful for. The second step is to write down why in as much detail as you can. And then the third step is to pick up the phone and call that person and read out what you wrote in step 2. Now, if somebody listening to this isn't comfortable with the third step, at a minimum, you want to drop them a voice note. You can drop them a voice note if you're not comfortable talking to them live. Drop them a voice note at the minimum. And the reason is because when you tell somebody through the medium of voice why you are grateful for them, your voice carries emotion and energy, and they can feel that. But if you just wrote a letter or a text message or email, they don't know the emotion that came with that. They have to figure out themselves the state you were in when you wrote it. But when you use your voice has power and emotion in it.
See, like for me, when you just said that, like I'm not very good at getting like emotions and stuff like that across. Like even when you said that, I thought, oh God, I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that third one. And obviously there's so many people in my life that I'm grateful for that help me. And I'm sure they all know it. And, but I'm probably not great at telling people certain things. And that would terrify me actually doing that. Like, and it's bad because you should, but what do you do like in that situation? Just try to really urge these people to do it and kickstart
and that's why I say voice note at a minimum, because one of the things I learned, so I was very fortunate recently. I was at a private dinner event hosted by Stephen Bartlett and the Diary of a CEO team. And there was 20 inspiring strangers that were selected at random. I happened to be one of the 20. And what we did is when we sat down at this dinner table, in front of our plate, each of us had a card. And on that card was a question that was left by one of the guests on the podcast show. And after we had the main meal, one by one, we stood up, we read out the question we had on our card, and we had to answer it in front of everyone in that dining space. Now, what I learned from that night is vulnerability is the gateway drug to connection. Now, if we want to connect with people, we've got to get vulnerable. And so that's why I encourage people to tell people you are grateful for them, even if it's a voice note you've pre-recorded. Tell them you're grateful for them, because what happens is that you become more connected with the people you're telling that to. It doesn't just benefit them, but it benefits you. And by the end of this evening, when we got around everybody sharing their answers, those 20 people sitting on the table that were strangers at the beginning were now friends. I mean, that's the power of being vulnerable amongst others.
Mate, I love that. I think that's so important as well. I think an issue is in society, especially males, I'd say under 35, I think it has probably the highest suicide rate in the whole of the UK, males under 35, I believe. So I believe males aren't good about actually talking about their emotions, right? I think Joe just touched on it as well. So for somebody who is emotional but can't get that emotions across or can't portray their emotions, they find it so hard. How can they start?
Sure. Easy first step. If you're not comfortable yet to share it outwardly with people, start journaling. Put your thoughts onto paper as a very first step, because then you get more comfortable with downloading your thoughts. So just pick up a pen and paper, whatever's on your mind, download it onto that sheet of paper. And that gets you more comfortable with understanding yourself first. And then as a next step, you could do it with a close friend. It's a very safe space. You both know each other for a while. You can start sharing that. And then if you want, you can expand that to a group. But I think the very first step we can take is to start to journal. Download our thoughts onto paper. Because as a friend of mine, Diana Chow, said in her TED Talk, writing is humanity distilled into ink. And if we are seeking wisdom in our own lives, it begins with knowing ourselves. Once we begin to know ourselves, that's how we become wiser. Going back to a question you asked earlier about what causes many businesses to fail, that actually I think is one of them, is we have a lot of ego when we are in business and we don't feel comfortable asking for help and support. I remember when I was in the US, just before I spoke at a conference, I had the chance to speak to Simon Sinek. And I said to him, what would be one tip you would give to people who want to be better leaders? And he said 3 words: ask for help. Is when we are either leading a team or we are running our own business, we think we got to know it all. And we think that if we ask for help and support, we look weak. But actually, you need support around you. If you're going to make something big happen, something that's bigger than just you alone, you're going to need a team. Yeah. And that's where support and help comes into play.
For sure. I guess it's that whole kind of independence versus interdependence argument, right? Like humans work better as a species together, not alone. And I think when people realize that, it really makes a difference. For example, I'm very fortunate. We're all very fortunate, actually. So Luke's my business partner for a marketing agency. It's kind of like yin and yang, without sounding too deep. But so like, for example, my weaknesses are more his strengths, vice versa. I'm very sales, he's very operational. So that really helps. What would your advice be? So someone's in business, right? They want to have a business partner. I hear this a lot. People ask me this a lot. They're like, Sam, I want a business partner. Who do I look for? How can I know that I can trust them? Like, what would be your advice with that? Do you have to be a good kind of scout for talent? Do you have to be good emotionally to read them? Like, how would you advise somebody to go about actually getting a business partner to help them?
Yeah, well, first of all, on that word trust, the unfortunate reality is you never know you can trust someone until you work with them. That's just unfortunately how the hiring process works. However, I would say, in my experience, if we want to get the right partner, first of all, we want to make sure that partner shares our same values. Do they share the same values that you have? And secondly, you don't want a copy of you. That's just not healthy for business. What you actually want is somebody, number one, who shares the same values as you, and second, who complements you. Somebody whose skill sets are different to yours, but together, you make a great team. I remember when I was researching Massimo Bottura and the work that he does at his restaurant in Italy. So Massimo Bottura is a 3-star Michelin chef. And how he comes up with his new creations for the plates of food that he puts out is because he understands the power of complementary insight. So he would have one chef who is very detail-oriented, very minimalist in their thinking. And he would have another chef who was much more creative, but very messy in the way that he saw a plate of food. But by bringing these different minds together, he had diverse inputs, which then created such a novel way of presenting his dishes.
It's really interesting. Wow, that's crazy.
I think one of the reasons we're called the Multipliers Club, so all about networking, meeting people. So you've had good opportunity to meet a lot of different people from all sorts of backgrounds, even some people you mentioned today that everyone knows of. So what would be your advice around when you're spending a short space of time with someone, how to network with that person, how to build relationships?
I think when it comes to building relationships, this is one of the business habits many overlook. So when I look at how I started my business, even to how I run it today, one of the habits I still do is every week I'm building, nurturing, and adding value to my network. It's so easy to forget the importance of your network, but it is one of the most powerful tools you have in business. Yeah. And I think with that, it's important to have a diverse network because you literally have no idea who in your network you could collaborate with or who you can help or they can help you. When it came to the book launch, this was a beautiful case in point because when I came to marketing the book, I said, how can I do it in a way that is different to other authors to get the name of my book out there? So I looked through my network and there was a guy in my network, a guy called Agostino Peroni, who heads up the bar at the Connaught Hotel in Mayfair. And I said, how cool would it be if he could create a cocktail inspired by my book? And so we ended up shooting a video of the cocktail being created. And for a period of time after the publication, if you went to that bar and you ordered the energized cocktail, it would be presented on a copy of my book. Nice. Imagine the people taking photos and
that's
videos.
Great PR.
It's fantastic
really
PR.
Yeah.
And then a couple of months after publication, I had
you come up with that idea?
So we actually came up with it together.
Okay, cool.
Again, it's the collaboration and working with someone in a different field.
Yeah.
And then a couple of months after publication, I had a friend who is an investor into the Web3 market, if you will. And he was investing in a metaverse educational platform. And so we put together one of the world's first book launches in the metaverse, where my avatar was speaking to a virtual room of avatars.
That is really cool.
And so I think when it comes to our network, the first thing is make sure we have a diverse network. One of the things I often say to business owners is that if you are only looking at your competition, you can only be as good as your competition. But when you're looking outside of your industry and you are saying, well, what can I learn from this company or that company and bring it into my industry to look innovative, to look different? I think that's where the value comes from. And the second is being bold, is thinking a little different. You know, how I connected with some of the names that I mentioned before we went live is I would go to some of these events where they were speaking. I would deliberately go early and I would sit as close to, if not on the front row of these events. Because most people, when they go to an event, they go to the middle part of the room or they go to the back. Yeah. I deliberately go to the front because I know that the people sitting on the front are likely to be their team or the people that put the event together.
Clever.
So either way I win, because if I'm connecting to the people that put the event together, I can now put myself forward as a speaker for the next event. Or if I connect with their team, I can say, hey, you know, I'm Simon, here's the value I can offer you. So when I went to Marie Forleo's event, she's a New York Times bestselling author. She did an event in London. And the person I connected with on the front row was her hairstylist. I mean, out of all people, it was her hairstylist. And the value I said to him, I said, how long are you and the team in London for? And they said, we're here for a few days promoting the book. And so I tell you what, let's connect on Instagram and I will send you a list of cool bars and restaurants you should check out if you have time.
Leading with value. I like
exactly, lead with value. And even though I was still young in my journey at that point, I could still offer value. The fact is they were new to London. They probably don't know where to go to eat and drink. So I'll send you a few tips. And then a few years later, when I had my book and I wanted to get Marie Forleo's endorsement for my book, I dropped him a message on Instagram and I said, hey, hope all is well. If it's okay, when you next catch up with Marie, could you nudge her and say if she's okay to provide a blurb for my book? And he did. And within a couple of days, he dropped me a message and said, Marie will be sending your publisher an endorsement for your book. And that came just because I happened to meet her hairstylist.
Mate, that's wicked.
But that was intentional as well. Like you said that a few times today.
It was intentional, but also luck, because at the time I did that, I didn't know I was going to write a book. because I was just going at it from being of value, and I was going with intention because I knew she would be a great person to have in my network. But at the same time, I knew I couldn't get to speak to her because she was so popular.
Gave yourself the best chance.
Exactly.
Just touching on network as well. Like, I think we all understand how important networking is. But for viewers listening to this who might be quite introverted or very young within their entrepreneurial journey, they might not have the biggest social circle. What would be your advice to them to actually start like an effective network? How do you start it?
Well, I think there's two different strategies here. So you have offline networking and you have online networking. So offline networking is when you go to an event or you go to a networking event and you have to put yourself out there. And one of the first questions you will get asked when you go to an event when no one knows you and you're early in your business journey is, what do you do? Yeah. You know, that's one of the first questions you're going to get asked. And what I learned when I was networking and building my relationships at the start of my business journey is never respond with a title. Most of us, when we get asked that question, we might say, I'm an electrician, I'm a chef, I'm a banker, I'm an IT analyst, whatever your title is. We respond with a title by default. That tells someone nothing. And often we have a judgment. I mean, just imagine if you came up to me and said, Simon, what do you do? And I said to you, I'm an accountant. You know, you're already going to have a judgment in your head about who I am and my personality, even though I've said nothing else apart from the fact I'm an accountant. I could be a really fun accountant, but just the fact I said I'm an accountant, you probably already have a judgment.
And that's so true.
And so what happens, again, it's not our fault because the human brain likes shortcuts. So what happens is as soon as we hear a job title, we categorize it into a box that we have experience of. So chances are, a stereotype. Really, So chances are we think of accountants as boring. So as soon as we hear that job title, we put it into that bucket. If somebody comes and says, hey, I'm an actor. Now straight away you think, oh, this sounds like it could be a really cool conversation. And so what I learned is I had to bypass the response of giving a title. And so I started to lead with story. And I got this idea from an American speaker. And he shared a story when he was on stage. He said, I remember getting asked at a cocktail party one evening what I did. And I said to them, I have been saving the world from boredom since before you were born. And straight away, the response he said he got from the other person was, they took their straw out of their drink and they said, tell me more. Now, his introduction had hooked them in. And in marketing, you might call this selling yourself to yourself. He got them to lead the questions. And he just gave story after story after story. And so that's what I learned is that when somebody asks you what you do, use a story. Because if you lead with a story, the very next thing they will say is, how do you do what you do? Tell me more about this.
I feel like I got done over with this trick because obviously that's how we connected at Founders Network, and that is how the conversation went.
What did he say?
I can't remember. I'd had a few drinks, but I remember coming back after, and I said to you boys in the group chat, I sent a voice note. I've asked him to come on the podcast. Like, he's a really cool guy. He just speaks cool. He's got cool stories, and I didn't know loads about you at the time. But yeah, I was like, he's really cool, and it'd be great on the podcast. And very good at speaking. From there, obviously, I followed you on Instagram, LinkedIn. We've spoke a few times, and obviously come to learn a lot more. But,
what is your answer then?
So I'll give an example of one I did recently. So one of the things I love doing when I go to a networking event is looking for groups of people because very few people approach an existing group. So I remember going to this group of 6 people and I inserted myself in that group and said, hey guys, I'm Simon. And of course, the first question is, hey Simon, what do you do? And I said to them, there are 6 of you here. So I'm going to give you 6 guesses. Everything I do is designed to raise people's awareness of what is possible so that they can write a new story.
Damn, that's cool as fuck. I'll be there. What is it?
What do you think I do? And straight away, what I've done is I've got everybody engaged. Now, someone might say, "Oh, are you a motivational speaker? Are you a coach? Do you write books?" And suddenly, everyone's guessing away. I said, "Oh, a little bit of that, a little bit of this." Yeah, you kind of got it there. So now, what I've done is I've brought everybody together, and now they're curious. So, how do you do that? And when it comes to business, I'm going to use a business context because I think this is where the listeners can benefit. The biggest mistake we make is when somebody asks you about your business, we jump into the abstract details. So if somebody said to me, Simon, how do you do what you do? If I were to respond with abstract details, I might say, well, if you were to work with me, we would meet twice a month. We would then have a WhatsApp channel set up.
Selling straight away.
And then what happens is they just can't process all of that because it's abstract. So instead what I do is I leave all of those details out and I keep giving the story. So when they said, Simon, how do you do what you do? I'm like, well, let me tell you about John, who recently approached me just 2.5 months ago at the beginning of the year. When he first sent an email to me, he was going through this particular challenge. Just last week, he has secured an opportunity to speak at the United Nations in Madrid. Wow. Can you do to me what you did with John? So what's happening is it's different. You're leading with a story and all that detail can be left till later.
That's the same with actually selling on the phone, really, isn't it?
Totally. Storytelling, stories.
Rather than just facts. Oh, this is exactly right.
Yeah, and the reason is because people buy on emotion. And this is why stories are powerful, is that you've got to create an emotional connection with people to get them to buy into whether it's a service, a product, or even an idea. You might be selling an idea to your team or to your company. You need to get an emotional buy-in. So that's the offline networking. On the online networking, it's a different ballgame because there's so many platforms, everything has different setups. But one of the things I've been doing for years and I still do, and it gets a lot of attention still, is I would say 90% of the time when I accept a new connection request on a platform like LinkedIn or when somebody accepts my connection request, I would drop them a voice note within 24 hours.
Got me there again.
You got the voice note, right? So I would drop them a voice note. And the voice note, again, isn't selling anything. It's just 7 to 10 seconds. Just saying, hey, good to meet you. Great to connect. Look forward to learning more or looking forward to catching up with you. Very, very simple. And there's 2 reasons why I love using voice notes on a platform like LinkedIn. First of all, the conversion is near 100%.
Really?
We're curious creatures.
When they listen to someone
Not necessarily the response rate, but the listen rate. Because if you get a text message come on your phone and you see the notifications and you see a preview of what's in it, you can say, oh, it's about that. I'll get back to that later. But when a voice note comes in, you're like, oh, what's in it? We're curious creatures. And so we want to click play to hear what's in that message. Secondly, again, what I said earlier, your voice carries energy. So people get an experience of what you're about through your voice. So that's one of the things I've been doing for years and I still do. The other strategy for networking online is what I call find where someone doesn't get love and give them love in that place.
How do you find where they don't get
So here's
love?
an example. Let's say you are following somebody that you want to be connected to or have a conversation with. And you go onto Instagram and they have hundreds of thousands of followers. They have tens of thousands of likes and hundreds of comments. Now, if you drop a comment on one of their posts, I mean, they'll probably never see it because it will get diluted by all the other comments and likes. But if you then go to another platform that this person is also on, and they've only got 2 comments on there. Now, if you put a comment in there that's a valuable comment, they're more likely going to see it because they have less love on that platform. So this is what I mean by find a platform where somebody you want to build a relationship with does not get the same love on the other platform and give them love. Then you'll get noticed a lot quicker. It's all about attention. I mean, whether it's offline or online, we live in an economy in which attention spans are very short. So how can you get someone's attention to know that you exist?
Mate, that's some of the best advice I've ever had.
I'm sending voice notes from now on. 100%.
Because we all do outreach with our businesses.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, like...
We used to do it a lot though. We
We
used to do the
it
voice
more.
notes.
We're a
It
little
did
bit-
work. at
It
the
worked
time.
well.
Yeah.
We're quite
Stopped it.
lazy now though because we run paid ads. I think a lot of businesses, when they start to progress, they start doing things differently, maybe a little bit more.
It needs to be more automated
way.
because obviously that stuff's just very manual.
Sure.
Yeah.
The question I have though, you said something about you need to dig deep into someone's emotion to get a buy-in. How do you dig deepest into someone's emotion to get an emotional buy-in? Like, what's the sweet spot?
Sure. So I think this would depend on the scenario. If, for example, if I'm pitching to investors or I'm talking to a room of people or I'm looking to sell a product or a service, it would depend on the setup. But if I take the scenario of I'm trying to sell someone something, then I won't focus on the thing that I'm going to sell right until the end. I will not even talk about it until the end. Because what I'm looking to do at the beginning is I'm looking to collect data. And when you collect data, it helps the person you're talking to feel like you understand them. That when you get to the point of providing that product or service, it feels like it's right for them. You know, you really thought about how this is going to help them, but you don't know that up front. And so I really want to know their challenges, their ambitions, their goals, their focus, what would be helpful to them. And that gives me an understanding of, well, actually, I've got something that could really serve and help you. And you mentioned that you're going through a particularly stressful time in your life right now. Well, this would actually really help that side. It would actually give you more space to do the things that you want to do. So I'm starting to speak to them and what's important to their journey rather than just something that is a one-size-fits-all. And so I think that's how the emotional buy-in is created, by first getting to know them and then positioning whatever you are trying to sell so you know it is suitable for them and their needs.
Do you think that's kind of slightly industry specific? So a lot of that stuff's kind of, so I've got like a design and build company, residential design and build. Currently these guys running ads and we're trying to call leads and stuff like that. I guess that's slightly different. They've registered interest, but even when you're just trying to sell to clients, you know, in any kind of, you go into the job or it's on the phone or it's the first point of contact with them, I find it very hard to, I've done it before on my old business, and then with mentoring packages, I took more of that strategy and it was very effective. I've not really ever been able to engage in a real kind of good sales pitch as such. Obviously we can talk about us and what we do and, you know, compared to, I guess, some other companies where they might have dealt with before, but in our industry, I've just found it really hard to find an effective asking these questions, finding their pain points, finding the challenges, and then, you know, down the line of the conversation, coming up with a solution that so happens to be the perfect fit because you've already told me.
And I think this is where
do that in this industry.
Yeah, two things come to mind here. First of all, is really understanding, and this is where I guess the cliche "know your customer" comes into play. It's really knowing somebody's pain point and the pleasure that you can bring. Yeah. And of course, the bigger the gap, the more opportunity you have. And the example I often give to people to illustrate how powerful this can be is that imagine I'm opening up a new dental practice and I want to drum up business. I want to get people coming to my practice to get their teeth checked. Now, I know that the biggest pain patients have is they don't like dentists. They don't like the pain of getting their tooth extracted. But we know we've got to do it. So it's one of those things you know you've got to do, but you don't like it and it's a painful procedure. Knowing that, imagine if my offer upon launch of my business was 100% painless tooth extractions or your money back.
Jake, I bet you wish you had that.
I love some of my teeth. Nightmare. I wish I had that.
Jake literally got butchered by a dentist.
Yeah, well, good, yeah. That was a bit like flashbacks and he was just talking about that.
I saw it. I was looking at your face.
You're tensing up.
I wish I had that.
But if I said that, think how many people will be queuing outside of my door.
Oh, mate, I'll be there.
There you go. And I haven't even launched yet. And so I think when we understand the pain that people are going through, and we can speak to that, but we have a solution that brings pleasure, you've got a business.
Mate, that's so true. I think talking about pain, I think a lot of people probably, definitely out there in the UK, probably worldwide, they lack purpose, like they lack any drive. They want to make a change, but they don't know what, and they're massive procrastinators. So what would your advice be to somebody listening to this who just feels kind of at rock bottom? They've got no prospects, they've got no kind of avenue, they want ambition, but they don't know quite what it is, and they just kind of feel like they've given up. How can you install motivation in somebody to say, come on, mate, look, you've got to give this a go, you know, just get back out there, get back on the horse. Like, what would you say to them?
I would say the fastest way to get that feeling of motivation and inspiration back is literally to put yourself in an environment where you can't help but be inspired. So go to an event where you know the energy is going to be high. You go to a business event, you come out, you're going to be inspired. You're going to hear stories, you're going to hear insights, ideas, just by sitting next to people who are in the same boat as you. So the reason we tend to lose motivation is because we go into our shell. We go back indoors and we fear about the next steps. But actually what we really want to do when we go through that dip, get ourselves out there, show up, read books, go to an event, listen to a podcast. When you change the energy that's around you, your internal state changes. I challenge anybody not to go to a Tony Robbins event, for example, and come out feeling exhausted.
Yeah, he's crazy though, isn't he? Like he gets people doing like star jumps. And
but it
raises energy though. Yeah, it's true.
Exactly. You move. It's like going to to do a workout in the gym. There will be days where you don't feel like you wanna go to do a workout, but I guarantee you that after you've done a workout, you never regret it. You never regret it. You might not want to do it before on some days, but once you've done it, you're like, man, that was good. Yeah. I feel much more positive.
A lot of the stuff we talk about is very just like you can put yourself in that position, but having someone put you in that position makes it a lot easier. So even just the gym and stuff, like getting a PT. Like, can help people be put in a position where they have to go. Like, that's what I do. I get myself mentors in certain things. I think that's probably, if you don't feel confident enough maybe in yourself to do it, then find somebody that's going to put you there, I think.
And that's why I think mentors, coaches, or even mastermind groups where you have other people who are business owners, where you can touch base with them on a regular basis. This stuff is so important because, as you said, when you're in the gym and you have a PT, you get results because you're being pushed by the personal trainer. You have to turn up. You're paying for his or her time. When you're working in a company, if your manager says, well, if you don't hand this in, then you're not going to get your bonus or we're not going to win the contract. Guess what? You get it done. But when it comes to our own life and our own business, often the only person keeping us accountable is ourselves. And that's often not the best person because we can give ourselves too much leeway. We can kind of go easy on ourselves.
So obviously you're a mentor. Can I ask you, do you have a mentor?
Yeah, I have a number of different mentors. I mean, when I first started, I just had one coach. But because I do a lot of different things now with my businesses, I've needed mentors who can guide me in paths that I'd never been on before.
Are these paid mentors or are these just mentors due to relationship?
Yeah, they're a mix. So some I pay, some I've known for a while, and I've reached
multiple
out.
Then?
Yeah, I've got multiple.
For kind of what avenues? Where do they specifically help you or focus on? And
often there's no specific area when we first go into a relationship because sometimes I just think, oh, this person's amazing. I just want to have this person's energy around me.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
And then we
that's
kind of
the best ones.
Yeah, and then we kind of find out where they can really help. But just to give an example, how diverse my influences are. I have someone who's just turned 16 years old as a mentor to me. I have someone who is 65 this year, also a mentor to me. Now, what each of them are going to teach me will be different. The 65-year-old mentor who is in America, he's been speaking internationally for decades. So I can learn a lot from him about how I go about doing that. Whereas a 16-year-old kid, if you will, he knows a hell of a lot about social media. He knows a lot about what works, what doesn't work, what I need to be thinking about, what's trending at the moment. And so he's going to give me insight that the 65-year-old cannot.
Where did you find him? Is it just like family member? Or
No. So he actually approached me probably about 5-6 years ago, following my content and said, I'd love to shoot some of your content for you. So he just kind of came into
confidence
my
as well, like at that age. Like
to put himself there and just said, hey, I want to learn videography. Can I shoot some content for you? And that's how it started. And then I saw that he had a good work ethic and he really enjoyed learning about the social media game. And so we end up just keeping in touch and I'm learning from him and he's learning from me. So it's been a great partnership.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I love that.
I'm sure you probably get a lot of people approach you. You've got quite a big social media following. What would you say for people to not do who message you or trying to get someone who's influential's attention?
Send him a voice note. And
what are like the do's and what are the don'ts? Because I'm sure you get some messages like, oh, hey, can you give me a job? Or like,
I would say it's probably similar to if you were approaching a job in any company. As in the first thing you've got to do is you've got to know who you're approaching. If you just kind of approach someone just because they've got a big following or they've achieved something, your questions and your messages can be very generic. So you want to make sure you actually know about what this person does, what's important to them. And these days, we're always sharing on social media. So it's very easy to kind of do that research. So that would be the first thing. And second is to be specific. If you're not specific, it's a lot harder to apply. I've got messages where people just send me a generic message saying, hey, can I be coached by you? I'm like, coached on what? And you know,
it's going to be like,
are you in a job? Are you running a
coaching.
business? I mean, that's created a lot of work for me, because then I don't have time to then reply and go, oh, tell me a bit more about you. Tell me about this. Are you in the UK? Are you abroad? I mean, that's going to be a lot of back and forth on email. But if somebody comes and says, hey, Simon, I've followed your work for a while. I've read your book, Energize. The chapter which really stood out to me was this one. And I'm actually going through something that is very much in line with what you went through in this particular chapter. And I had 2 specific questions based on that, actually. And now I'm thinking, wow, this is a really good message. And I want to get back to this. So I think it's, one, understanding how to approach, and then actually doing the research, actually knowing the person that you want to approach.
Do you open all your messages?
I open most. I don't have to, I used to open all our messages. Now I don't, just because I get a lot more messages than I used to. But I always say I try and respond to as many as I can, purely because I know what it feels like to someone when somebody you are approaching or sending a message responds to it. Yeah. So I try and do that as best I can to the messages I do get to read.
Do you have like an end goal? Like, you've had a lot of success. What's your, like, do you have one of those goals where you're just like, all right, cool, when I hit this, I'm going to go Bali and have a cocktail on a beach? Do you know what I mean? Is there like an end for you?
I think if you really love what you do, there is no end. If you really love what you do, you are a constant work in progress. Some people refer to this as the infinite game or the long game, whatever you call it. I think that if you really love what you do, there's no concept as retirement. I mean, if you look at Brian Tracy, for example, if you look at Richard Branson, they're still running businesses. They're still going. It's just because it's life for them. I mean, opening a business, having an impact, making change in the world. I mean, what would they do if they weren't doing that? I mean, it's very much part of who they are. It's their DNA. And so I think that for me, I used to have a lot of these, some of the goals I mentioned earlier, you know, the money, the house and what have you. But the only goal I now have is just to be better than who I was yesterday. Because I realized that if I am constantly better than who I was yesterday, the rewards will come. The rewards will come in time.
So what's your opinion on money? Obviously everybody chases, well, not everybody, but a lot of people chase the money. With what you do, it's very much about internal happiness. I respect that as well, because that's I think that's what we all actually desire. Yeah. But we always think that money's going to get us to that point. So what's your personal opinion when it comes to money? Are you still looking at the money, or do you just do your job? And obviously I don't know your setup and how you're actually living at the moment.
My thoughts on money is, first of all, money is important. Money for a business is oxygen. If you got no cash, you got no business. So you need money. Money is what I would call fuel. Now, it's like driving a car. You got no fuel, your car's not going anywhere. So money is important. But we cannot tie our emotional well-being to money, because otherwise it's a race you cannot win. You're always going to want more. You're going to end up living this tragic scenario of living as if you're never going to die, and then dying having never really lived. So you're always living for the future. When I get this, when I get that, when I get that. And then if you happen to then pass, I mean, you weren't actually living in that time towards that achievement. And so yes, money is important on the one hand, but on the other side, we have to be careful not to tie our emotional well-being to money. Because otherwise, we're never going to enjoy life. We're never going to enjoy the things we actually have right in front of us.
That's where, especially, I feel like I've been on the fence of kind of understanding that, and then thinking, to a certain extent, have I kind of learned it? Do I really want to implement that to its full extent too young before I have made it? Like, I kind of want to make it for the first, not even fully, not even to this huge level, but even just, 5 years of maybe I should have spent a bit more time with friends or with loved ones or family, or focus on a few other things other than business. But at the same time, I'm thinking, I know if I do that for the next few years, it is going to very quickly kind of hopefully.
I mean, one thing one of my mentors said to me once, which I thought was fantastic, very, very beautifully summarized. He said that money is an echo of value. Money is an echo of value. So what is meant by that statement is that the more value you put out into the world, the more money you get. As simple as that. Yet we have it the wrong way around. We focus on money first. But the thing is, if you're always chasing money, you forget all the things that actually help you generate that wealth. Yeah. So if you think about success stories, what you'll notice is they've given so much value into the world. Of course, it's obvious they're rich because they lead by value. You've got YouTubers who, before they started the YouTube channel, they weren't particularly wealthy. And then they gave so much value with the content they put onto YouTube that some of these creators now earn $40,000, $50,000 a month just through YouTube ad revenue. Now, they didn't start it because of the money. If they did, they probably would have given up after 6 months when they're only earning a few dollars. But they did it because they felt they had so much value to share through their platform that in time
That's what makes me tick over. Whenever me and Luke have bought a course, especially me, if someone gives away free value, I just think, oh my God, this is wicked. Like, imagine if I buy it, what am I going to get then? So when it comes to like, obviously money, hard work, then you've got hustle culture, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, like work hard, play hard. I don't sleep 7 days a week, 15 hours a day. Is that sustainable?
Absolutely not. I mean, it might work for the short term, but it doesn't last. You're very quickly going to burn out. And I think if you are building a company and you have employees you hire, it's not a great example to set them. Because what are you teaching them? You're saying it's okay to burn out, and then you realize why everyone isn't operating at their full capacity because they're burnt out. And so I think hustle is important, don't get me wrong. You need to hustle to make things happen. But at the same time, we've got to balance that with periods of disconnection. If you go back in history, what you will read, I don't know if these stories are true or not, but some of the greatest inventions of mankind have happened not because somebody was stuck at their desk or staring into screens or books, but actually when they were disconnected. Yeah. Isaac Newton, apple falling on his head. Archimedes lying in the bathtub, eureka. Thomas Edison fishing with no bait, so nobody, not even the fish, would disturb him. And they would credit those moments as where they had those breakthroughs. And the thing I often say is there's no point collecting all of these dots if you don't give yourself the space to connect those dots.
Yeah. That's what Joe said about a holiday, innit?
Yeah, I always say that, like, you need to sometimes give yourself some time. Like, we all are obviously busy in our businesses, but I always say just free up that time. However, recruit someone, whatever you got to do, just to give yourself a bit of time. We're all hustlers. We all think about how we can move forward. So if you freed up 4 hours or whatever, an hour a day or 2 hours a day of your time or a day a week of your time fully, just to let yourself think, within 6 months, you'll fill that time back up with a new move to elevate your business, So it's not like we're going to come unstuck and you're losing money. But I think for me, like going on walks, either just in the shower, in the spa, at the gym, or on the treadmill in the gym, and especially on holiday, I think that's the only time where fully you're just switched off. And I always take like my notebook and stuff like that on holiday. And then, just all of a sudden, that's where your ideas come. Every time I don't come back from holiday ever without a new idea and a new way to drive the business and a new kind of fresh start as such. So it's so important, I think, to exactly that, give yourself, like, take a step back sometimes to be able to take 2 steps forward.
Mate, I completely agree. Like, some of the best ideas I had was when me and you were in Mexico together, Tulum, March last year. Yeah. First time in like 2 years, because of COVID, I took a holiday. Oh, mate, I had the best ideas, man. I didn't sleep on the plane back 12 hours. My birds conked out watching Top Boy. I'm just, no, like, going to start this page, going to do this. And I don't know if you remember, Luke, I come back and I literally had like an hour meeting with Luke. I was like, look, we need bang, 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 bang. And just that time, I would never have had the time to have my mind open up if it wasn't for actually stepping away from everything.
Being on the plane is honestly the best because you get 12 hours. Yeah. Your missus is asleep next to you, or you book her next to a seat somewhere else. And you got no Wi-Fi, so no one's calling you, no one's texting you, and you just get all your thoughts down on your page, and that's it. You get no one disturbing you. Like on the plane is. I
love plane journeys just for that reason. Yeah. It's because you could be reading a magazine or watching a show or watching a documentary or watching a podcast and be like, oh, I got this idea. And then
it comes.
It's just you
especially
and your
if you
thoughts.
have the window seat. For me, I'm just looking out the window, and it is literally that. It's like. I find it so mad where like new ideas from not reading something or hearing something. So I could not speak to anyone else again and I'm going to keep coming up with new ideas. So they're already there. They're in my head. I just need to give myself the time. And sometimes I'm just looking, it's just like, oh shit. I think I've just figured something out,
I think what that shows us is that we are all creative individuals. When somebody says we're not creative, I'm like, go and have a look at children. We are innately creative. Children are just expressing their creativity all the time. But as we grow older, what happens is we get so consumed with this concept of busyness that we don't give ourselves space to be creative or access that creativity inside of us. But when we actually give us that space to allow our creative process to unleash itself, we go, wow, actually, there's some really good ideas we have. We just don't give ourselves the time to explore them.
Yeah, your brain's too fogged.
Yeah.
When you've got your day-to-day.
And then it's also about implementing those ideas. Like I said earlier, I guess touching base on taking action and not procrastinating over your ideas. I think sometimes, especially I do it, it's a balance of where you come up with so many ideas.
Yeah.
It's knowing whether sometimes probably you should push on certain ideas more and get things done. And on the other side, it's like, well, you can't implement all of the ideas.
Do you suffer from that? Because obviously as entrepreneurs like we are, we're like, us three run a business together. I've got my own business, they've got their own businesses, and we're now going to be looking at doing another business. This Multipliers Club is a new business. Like we're always literally just constantly just the newest and latest idea. Do you struggle with that as an entrepreneur, or are you set with what you're doing?
Definitely. I mean, I'm always coming up with new ideas. I think that if you're not, then you're not expanding your circle enough, because whenever I meet new people, especially from different industries, I'm always getting other creative ideas coming up. I mean, for example, I'm looking to catch up with a chef in the next month. And one of the ideas we've kind of just thrown out there is putting together a tasting menu, a dining experience with a tasting menu inspired by my book. And so when you go to this, you sit on this table, there will be a story for each plate of food. And each plate will be connected to a certain part of my book. And so you're going through my book instead of through the medium of a physical copy of the book, you're going through it via the medium of food. And so again, that's another idea that's come out of my head just through meeting him. And so we'll see what happens. But yes, I'm always coming up with lots of ideas.
That's great with what you do, because you can just base it on, I mean, we come up with different business ideas that aren't even related. So that's even more brain fog. Yeah. But for you're entrepreneurial in the terms that you can, but with what you do, you can pretty much do anything in any walk of business.
But I think when we think about it from a business point of view, like if I look at it from a macro perspective, I've got coaching, I've got speaking, I've got brand partnerships, I've got writing. So there's lots of different arms. The key is that if you come up with a new idea, it's mapping it out visually to see how they connect. They can be different.
So we don't do that, do we?
But it's how do they connect with each other?
With the podcast, that's the only reason I think we was willing to start it, because we all said stepping outside of our comfort zone, we want to get our faces behind our own brand and have the confidence to speak in front of the camera. And, so it's also marketing ourselves. We talk about our businesses and so on. So for me, I saw although it's completely different, but it's a pretty solid link. So that's where I was like, okay, I'm willing to do it. I didn't want to divert my attention to any other businesses at the moment other than...
Yeah, and I think that's what's important, is that when we do have the ideas, it's just being clear, how do these things connect and what is the purpose of them? So often when you have a podcast, or in my case, I'm speaking, whether it's as a guest on a podcast or on a stage, I call that the shop window, if you will. That's like a shop window to the public to get a feel for what you do, your knowledge, your background, your insights. And then they'll be like, oh, I want to learn some more. And then they might click your links, they might look at other things you're doing. And that's when they come into your ecosystem. Yeah. But you've got to have a little clarity on what is my ecosystem? What are the things that are within this ecosystem that people can access? And how are they connected with each other? So you've almost got to understand your customer's journey from knowing how are they coming into the ecosystem and what is their potential route. And once you know that, it becomes a lot easier to think, well, is this viable in the short term, or do I need to pause on that? You can kind of see how these different pieces fit together.
Talking about ecosystems, you've got your individual ecosystem as well, right? So I've read a lot about how you should cut all negative people off, or anyone who's bad influences, you should cut off. And about 2 years ago, I realised if I'd done that, I'd have no fucking friends left. So it was more like kind of limiting certain angles of my life. Like a lot of our pals are DJs, love them, still love a rave, but I don't do it as much anymore. Have you had a shift in your personal ecosystem where you've had to cut off people that you might have really loved to become a better version of yourself? Like, what was your experience with
I think this is an inevitable part of personal growth. Is that as you evolve, not everybody is going to evolve at the same pace as you. So I find it difficult to spend too much time amongst some of the ex-colleagues in finance, simply because I find that I'm the only one speaking often when we catch up. Because when I ask them how things have been, it's the same old, still waiting to get that promotion, the boring accountants. But whereas then when the question is put to me, I'm like, I've done this, I've done that, I'm looking forward to doing this project. And so I don't feel as challenged, or sometimes the conversation may not be as interesting. Now, it's nothing against them, because they're still great people. It's just that, it's just that we are now not on the same page. It's just because I've evolved to a completely different level. I'm now running my own business. I'm looking at taking things more global. And so my mindset and the way I see things is completely disconnected to where they are. And so I found that even within my personal circle, that has changed as I myself has developed. I mean, the people that I get to spend time with now, for example, people, when I started, I would never have imagined that I would be having coffee or lunch with. And now when I go to those meetings, or I spend time with these individuals I now get to have time with, I come out of that energized, inspired, and thinking, wow, I can do so much more. And that's the sort of conversations I love to be involved in.
Was it a lonely transition, from that life to another, when you're kind of in between the transition? Do you feel like kind of we are at the minute to a certain extent? Like, was that lonely for you? Do you ever suffer with loneliness, or have you?
I would say it was a lonely transition, because nobody in my immediate family had run their own business. They'd all worked for someone. And so there was no direct support I had at the beginning. And because I was running this as a side hustle while I still had a full-time job, of course I couldn't tell anyone, because I wanted to keep this quiet. I didn't want people to worry about, is he going to stay in the job? Is he going to be spending more time in his side hustle? There wasn't many people I could share that with, apart from some close friends and family. And even when I did transition, I didn't tell everyone straight away, because, as I mentioned at the beginning, I grew up in a fairly strict Chinese household where they were all about academic excellence. And for their child to say, I'm going to quit a well-paying job to go into something that is not guaranteed a monthly income and is very uncertain. It was going to be very worrying. And so I was very careful about what I shared at the early stages. And only once I started to get some success, I started to share that a bit more with them. And the moment I knew they bought into it was when they started sharing it on their social media. I said, I think they kind of like the choice I made. But yeah, it was lonely at the beginning, because there wasn't many people I could tell. And I had to have a lot of belief in myself that I could make this happen. But once it became known to everyone, then of course I sought out to become part of communities, members clubs, and I was able to connect with a lot more entrepreneurs. But in the early stages, it was very much a lonely transition.
Would you say it's been your biggest challenge with your building phase? Like, did you ever have a moment where something so bad happened, you were like, you questioned everything?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm honest, I'm still questioning today.
You're doing all right.
I think that every stage that we get to in business, you're always going to have a challenge. The challenges always remain. The nature of them just changes. When it was at the beginning, my biggest challenge was, can I get clients? Can I create a sustainable business? That's probably every business's challenge when they first start. And then the next challenge as I grew is, can I diversify into speaking and into these other areas? And then the challenge then becomes, how do I hire the right people? And so you're always facing challenges. The nature of them just changes. But at the beginning, it was all about, how do I get cash into the business? Because if I remember when I quit, I gave myself about 18 to 20 months runway, that if I got zero income for 18 to 20 months, I'll be fine up until that point before things started to get a bit tight. And it was pretty tight in the first few months because not much traction occurred. But then about the 10th or 11th month, things started to pick up slowly. And it was just trusting that this was going to work. And again, you don't know none of this ahead of time. You don't know if things are going to work out. So I had to really trust the process and back myself in the early part, in which everybody was probably thinking in their head or questioning my motives. Simon, why are you giving up this well-paid job in banking to go into something that is not paying you nearly as much as what you earned before? And it was a real test. When everybody else is doubting you and questioning your motives, to stick to your vision, to stick to the plan, can require a hell of a lot of discipline.
What about now? What's the challenges at the moment? What's your main challenges? What are you going through at the second? What are you working on or recently
so I think some of the main challenges is still hiring. Yeah. Because I think hiring will always be a challenge for any business, whatever size you're at. I can hire someone and it just doesn't meet my expectations after they start working, or I'll hire someone who's amazing and then 7 months later they're gone. Because
what type of roles are you hiring?
So at the moment it's been mainly content creation. As I do more speaking internationally, it's then going to be a speaker manager to manage that side of the business, because I can only handle so many inquiries on speaking. So then it's having a team to manage that. But yeah, that's been one challenge, the hiring. The second is the more international stuff.
I can help with that. I run a travel agency, so
we'll chat after. Yeah. So now I'm doing a lot more international work, as in understanding the different markets, what I need to keep in mind, who I need to connect with. Because when I travel, again, I'm thinking entrepreneurial all the time. If I'm going to go to a city, how do I maximize my time there? Yeah. So if I'm going to be speaking in the city, is there someone I can meet for a drink? Is there a radio station? Is there a podcast I can jump on if I'm in that city and somebody happens to be to be holding their recording studio there? So it's just kind of really understanding the different cities I'm traveling to and how I can maximize those opportunities.
So one question I had is that a lot of people that do like life coaching and motivational speaking, like they've actually been through the darkest times themselves. Yeah. But those people seem to be the best at actually helping other people. Why do you think that is?
I think the reason why going through those periods in life make you really good at helping others is because it gives you empathy. When you've gone through something challenging in your life, especially when it's personal, it makes you relate to others a lot easier. But if you've not gone through those dark moments, it can be a lot tougher. Not to say you can't, but it is a lot tougher to relate when somebody shares their own challenges. It's interesting because I went through dark periods in my life. And I think that certainly helped me when I made that transition and when I started coaching people. When I was 17, I lost my mum to a tragic accident. I failed a year at university, which was unheard of in the Chinese community for a Chinese student to fail a year at university. Yeah. And then, of course, at Lehman Brothers, I was out of a job within 14 months. So I went for a period in where I had lots and lots of challenges. And I think navigating them not only made me who I am, but also allowed me to help people in a way that I could empathize with what was going through in their own mind and life.
I think that is when you meet people and you might tell them something that you've been through and suddenly they actually say, oh, actually, I've faced the same thing. But you automatically connect and people feel like, oh, actually, there's so many things people are going through, but you just don't know.
Yeah. And I think this again goes back to why vulnerability is so important. You know, if you just give somebody advice, it's very difficult for people to listen to it and apply it because they might say, oh, it's easy for him or her to say because they've got this, they've had a privileged upbringing, they've had this advantage that I didn't have. But when you can open up and say, actually, you know, things weren't always this way. And you know, I had my own challenges, I had my own losses, but it's taught me these lessons. I think then they're able to connect more to the advice that you're giving.
And on that, just what springs to my mind is, it links to a lot of things, but we touched on it earlier about you have to be open-minded and be willing to be challenged and be willing to learn to move forward. With, I see it, people that are quite pessimistic. It doesn't matter what you say, or even with that, if you say, oh, you know, this person, they hear the story, first thing they think is, oh, exactly that, they had a privileged upbringing. Then they hear they didn't and they think, oh, they got lucky, or they, you know, whatever. There's always a reason why not to listen, why not to learn. Oh, it's a different industry. Oh, it's not the same. Oh, yeah, but they started 5 years ago and da-da-da-da-da. Those types of people, these pessimists, how do you come across a lot of people like that? And how do you try to...
unpessimistic.
Try to get them to think more optimistic, to try and open their mind, to try and listen, to try and take inspiration from, you also touched on it, from other industries and be innovative. that mindset? How can you kind of not necessarily completely change it, but shift it?
I think that if they're coming from it from that angle, it's not going to be a straightforward process. Because first of all, we don't know what's influencing that mindset. They may be going through a tough period in their life, so naturally they're very pessimistic. They may have lost something in their life, so naturally it's affecting their mindset. So first of all, I would want to understand what is contributing to that pessimism. And very often what you'll find is that people aren't just pessimistic for pessimistic's sake. There's something going on in their life that is influencing that pessimism. And second is to slowly change their inner state through very subtle ways before they are ready to own it. Because ultimately, the person that changes has to own that journey. You can't say, I'm going to give you a reward if you change to being an optimist, because that won't last. They'll get the reward and they'll go back to what they were doing before. And so what we've got to do is to slowly change it in very subtle ways. And I'll give an example. If I know that I've got a friend I cannot avoid, and I have to meet up with this person on a regular basis, but I know that they're pessimistic and they're negative, such that when we catch up at the end of a week, and I say to them, how's your week gone? And they're going to go, oh, it's been bad. I didn't get the promotion. I missed out on this and this happened in my life. If I already know that they're going to give me a pessimistic answer, what I can do to influence that is I can change my question. Instead of, how has your week been? I could say, what has gone well for you this week? And now what I've done is I've shifted their focus to what has gone well, very subtly. But what happens is now their mind is focused on the positive without consciously realizing it. So I think there's certain things we can do, but ultimately they have to own that journey.
If they're real pessimists, they'll just say nothing.
I think I see it a lot with like myself, like there's certain people I just know not to, I don't discuss with lots of people anyway, because I like to keep it quite to myself and to those very close to me that understand business, like these boys and stuff. But, you know, if you said, for example, you mentioned earlier, focusing more on international, if you had a friend, you said, I want to get out to America, the first thing they say is, oh, that market's too hard, or, you know, that market's really tough. Or, there's so many people I know like that I don't know if it's because the only answer I have come up with is they can't believe in themselves to achieve these things. So why are they going to believe in you to do it? Sort of thing. That's
sometimes they're also projecting their way of seeing the world onto you. So because they may not believe it's possible, they're projecting that onto you. And so sometimes it's just a reflection of their mindset. You know, it's very different if you were to share that with, let's say, somebody who's successful, who's achieved a lot. They would probably say, best of luck. Let me know how I can help you.
Exactly.
And so that's a reflection of their mindset. And so often it's just how they see the world. And when you have that awareness, you can protect yourself from it. You know, the key is not to let that affect your mindset. The analogy that comes to my mind is like, it's like rowing your boat in an ocean. Dry land is ultimately where you want to get to, and the water around you may be negative. Now, if you're aware of that, you can guard your boat and keep moving forward. But the moment you let that water into your boat, what happens is it starts to sink and feel heavy. And that's exactly the feeling we get when we have those negative influences, saying things like, you can't do that. Why are you even trying? It's too competitive. It's too hard. Now, if you let it get to you, you're going to also think that. And that's going to become your mindset. And what I often say is that energy is infectious, but energy is also neutral. So what it means is that whether it's negative or positive, you can't help but be more of that type of energy. That's why we have to be very mindful of the influence that can have.
Mate, that's so true. I think you also get, I think the better you do, the more kind of jealousy you naturally attract. But then I also believe that you never really get hate from anyone who's doing better than you. Do you know what I'm saying? Have you experienced haters or hate like a lot of people do? And if so, how did that affect you negatively? And how do you get around the hate?
Well, first of all, I think that whatever you do, especially when it requires showing up, i.e. you have to put yourself out in public, whether it's on social media or speaking on a stage, you have to accept that you're always going to get haters. I always like to think of it this way. Whenever you talk to an audience, there'll be some small percentage of that audience that will hate you whatever you do. You can do the best job, they'll still hate you. You'll have some in the audience who will love you, whatever you do. They become your raving fans, if you will. And then the majority will be somewhere in the middle, somewhere in between those two extremes. Now, we cannot let that small percentage of the audience dictate how we feel about ourselves. And if we can respond to it in a healthy way, we just keep moving forward. I remember when I shared one of my early videos on YouTube, I had a comment from someone who called themselves Batman 09857, something like that.
Wanker.
And he wrote in his comment, get a real job and learn how to speak English. And I just laughed it off. And I responded just by saying, thank you so much for the feedback, Bruce Wayne. And that was it. I just kind of laughed it off. And I think that if we are aware of the impact it can have and we know how to protect ourselves from it, it's fine. It's only if we let that creep in and affect us.
Yeah. Funny you say that. I think it was last night, Tommy Mallet put a post up. Someone had wrote some comment just going at him. And he just responded like, yeah, your mum. And he just, he put a thing up, said, sometimes you just got to let them be right. But yeah, it's funny. I guess you just got to not let it affect you.
It's funny how you can be all about positivity and change like you are with such a positive message and still get hate. Like, I'm sure it is very minimal compared to, say, for example, like an Andrew Tate. Something completely different, right? But do you think maybe just like haters 9 times out of 10, they're more angry at themselves than they are at the person's content they're consuming?
Definitely. I think that usually when hate is put out, it is usually because we happen to be in the line of fire at the time that they're going through something that is creating that hateful attitude. You know, if you're going through a tough time, you're going to find any avenue you can to express it or to release it. And if a video happens to pop up and you're going through that period in time, then guess what? Not a nice comment's going to come out. I'm going to be in that line of fire. And I think it's just accepting that when you are on, say, social media, which many of us are, you don't know who's going to be commenting half the time. And it's very easy to just express yourselves with no restriction on social media. And yeah, as I said, haters will always be there.
Haters gonna hate.
Yeah, for sure. Ricky Gervais makes me laugh about it as well. He basically retweeted, I think it was like Forbes or whatever, and it said Rihanna and Beyonce give their condolences to the earthquake in Turkey. And then Ricky Gervais commented, I feel like a cunt, I only sent money. And it got so much hate. I was thinking like, he's actually sent money, whereas they're just giving condolences. I think everyone's too sensitive.
Yeah, I think you've got to find the humor and stuff. I mean, a friend of mine who also released a book, I remember he very funnily shared a 1-star review that he had for his book. And
have you had any 1-star reviews?
I think I have. I haven't checked through all the comments yet.
He's back.
The Dark Knight Returns. And the 1-star comment says something like, this book had no substance, it had no research, it's a copy of other books, all of this stuff. And he shared the comment, and I loved how he responded. He shared a comment on his feed, and he said, if you want a book, the copies of other books that doesn't share anything new, make sure to buy my book. And I thought that was hilarious. The way that he just embraced that comment and turned it into something funny.
So most books are there, isn't it? Yeah. Most books are little.
What's the main thing you want people to take from reading your book, and then, I don't know if it's the same message or different, and then from consuming your content and from your talks and your general
I think the main message from my speeches, my work and my book is to take responsibility for where you are and where you want to be. It's so easy to blame other people, other things, and not to take ownership. But life truly begins when you take responsibility for where you are and where you want to be. That's the key thing I want to say, is that we tend to easily give up control of our life to other people. But when we take back control and we get to write our story, that's when life becomes so exciting. That's when life can feel like a dream, when you're doing the things that make you feel alive.
Love that.
That's powerful.
Lots of powerful stuff.
Luca, is the last question.
Last question. Firstly, thank you for your wisdom. Really, to be fair, I think
Yeah, it's really good.
yeah.
I'm glad we recorded it because a lot of shit I'm thinking. If I was wishing I was writing all this down, like, gonna refer back to it. But
if the listeners or viewers didn't take anything away from it, then send Simon a voice note and give him some feedback. Not on the Elias as Batman. But yeah, so I think one question we ask everyone at the end is, I think you're going to have a few, to be honest with you, but what would you say to fucking hell. Thinking of Batman. What is one of your winning habits that you have?
Winning habits I have is, I would say, if I had to pick one, it is exercise. Working out on a daily basis creates an incredible domino effect in your life. When you come out of doing a workout, whether it's a swim, a cycle, a workout in the gym, whatever the day throws your way, you are in such a good state to respond to it.
Yeah. Are you in the morning?
For me, it depends. I used to be morning every day, but since becoming a parent, I've had to be a bit more flexible because it depends on how good a night of a sleep my child's had, whether she's in nursery or she's not in nursery. But I aim to go every day still. Just the time of day might be more flexible than when I was before a parent. But that one habit has been incredible in my life. Yeah, it's literally impacted everything else. Yeah, it made me want to eat better. It made me want to sleep more. It just made me realize how important it is to move our bodies. And health literally is the first wealth. I mean, if there's anything we've learned through the COVID pandemic, is that without your health, you can't do much. To the healthy person, they'll have lots of hopes, wishes, and dreams. But to the sick, they've only got one. Just to be healthy again. So I think the message here really is to stop making your health a side hustle. Make it a priority, and you give yourself a fantastic platform to show up in every area of your life.
I definitely agree. And then what have you got a winning habit that you would like to achieve or working on at the moment?
A winning habit that I would love to achieve.
Or you'd like to adopt in your day to day.
Yeah, I would probably say more meditation. I used to meditate on a daily basis before I was a parent. Now I'm a parent, it's been a bit harder to kind of get that in every day. So that's something I would like to get back on track.
Very hard to meditate.
I can't go into full noise cancellation mode. I've got to keep half of it on.
Wicked.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Simon, for coming on. Really appreciate it. It's been a great episode.
Thank you so much for having me.